The morning sun had barely lifted above the horizon, but the base was already alive with shouts, boots pounding asphalt, and the metallic clang of weapons racks. Dust hung in the air, caught in the first streaks of light. Rows of recruits stood stiff-backed in formation, shoulders tense as they waited for the next round of orders. Among them was Private First Class Riley Carter, her uniform freshly pressed but already sticking uncomfortably in the humid air. She had enlisted against the advice of nearly everyone she knew. Her mother feared the risks, her friends doubted her endurance, and her former classmates, those who still bothered to talk to her, snickered at the idea that she could survive boot camp. Riley hadn't enlisted to prove them wrong. She had enlisted because something in her life demanded to be tested. Something inside her had been waiting to face the kind of fire that stripped away excuses. The problem wasn't the endless push-ups, the blistering runs, or even the sleepless nights filled with drills and inspections. She could handle all that. The real problem was General Marcus Halverson. He wasn't supposed to take such a direct interest in recruits. Generals typically stayed far above the day-to-day grind of training, but Halverson had his ways. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a jaw like stone and eyes that seemed to drill holes through bone. He carried an aura that crushed conversation whenever he entered a room. He had built his career on strictness, discipline, and an almost brutal sense of hierarchy. To him, recruits were not individuals but clay to be molded, and he had no patience for anyone who resisted shaping. From the first week, he had singled Riley out. During drills, he barked her name louder than the others. When rifles were inspected, hers was always the one he claimed had a smudge, even if it gleamed. When the platoon marched, her step was always half a beat late in his eyes. She became the object lesson, the warning to others. Don't be like Carter. Some recruits sympathized, whispering encouragement in the bunks when the lights were out. Others distanced themselves, fearing that her bad luck might rub off. Riley bore it with a stoic face, but inside, the weight grew heavier every day. It came to a head on the morning of the endurance trial. The recruits lined up at the edge of the obstacle course, a sprawling gauntlet of mud pits, walls, ropes, barbed wire, and water ditches. Completing it within the time limit was mandatory. Failing meant recycling back weeks of training, a humiliation few could endure. The air was tense with the smell of sweat and damp earth. Halverson himself stood at the front, his shadow stretching long across the dirt. He paced slowly, boots sinking into the mud, his voice carrying like thunder. "This course is designed to break you," he barked, "and if you break, you don't belong here. Some of you will find your limit today, and some of you," his eyes flicked toward Riley, "never belonged here in the first place." The words stung sharper than any insult she'd endured. The other recruits shifted uneasily, some stealing glances at her. Riley didn't flinch. She simply fixed her gaze on the course ahead. The whistle blew. Chaos erupted as bodies surged forward. The first wall loomed, wooden planks slick with dew. Recruits scrambled up and over, boots thudding as they dropped to the other side. Riley's fingers found purchase on the edge, her muscles straining as she pulled herself up. She vaulted over, landing hard but steady. The course stretched on like a battlefield. Mud sucked at boots, ropes burned palms, barbed wire forced bellies into the dirt. Riley pushed through each barrier with grit carved from weeks of sweat and silence, but Halverson was every weary shouting from the sidelines, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. "Carter, you're slowing down. Carter, that rope doesn't climb itself." Pathetic. Her lungs screamed, her arms trembled, but she kept going. She wasn't the fastest, but she refused to stop. She carried herself through sheer will, one obstacle at a time. The final section loomed, a flooded trench beneath a low crawlspace. Water glistened, dark and cold. Recruits ahead of her plunged in, gasping as the chill bit into their skin. Riley dropped to her belly, sliding into the murky water. It swallowed her whole. She clawed forward, elbows digging, chest scraping against the boards above. Halfway through, her boot snagged on something. She twisted, but the water pressed in around her, sapping her breath. Panic clawed at her chest. She yanked harder, lungs burning. For one dizzying second, the thought pierced her, maybe Halverson was right, maybe I don't belong. Then another thought slammed into her with equal force. Not like this, not today. With a raw cry, she ripped her leg free, the sole of her boot tearing loose. She surged forward, teeth clenched, dragging herself through the last stretch. When she finally burst out of the trench, coughing and soaked, the world seemed to pause. She staggered to her feet, mud dripping from her uniform. Around her, other recruits had finished, panting in the dirt. Halverson stood with his arms crossed, watching her. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. The stopwatch clicked. She had made it within the time limit barely. The recruits expected him to tear her down, to declare her a disgrace. Instead, Halverson stepped forward, his boots squelched in the mud as he closed the distance. Silence swept over the field. Even the wind seemed to still. He stopped inches from her, his shadow towering over her smaller frame. His voice dropped, low and sharp. "You should have quit in that trench." Riley's chest heaved, but she met his eyes. "I don't quit, sir." Something flickered across his face, anger, maybe, or something else buried deeper. Then, in a voice that carried across the field, he barked, "Platoon, attention." Every recruit snapped upright. Halverson's gaze lingered on Riley, then swept across the others. "What you just witnessed," he said, his tone booming, "was spirit. Not strength, not speed. Spirit." Carter here nearly drowned, but she kept moving. "That is what keeps you alive in combat. That is what I demand of every one of you." Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Shock, awe, maybe even respect. Riley stood frozen, water dripping into the mud, unsure whether she had just been praised or condemned. Halverson turned back to her. For the briefest moment, his eyes softened, though his voice remained steel. "You froze the whole base today, Carter. Don't forget it, and don't waste it." Then he marched away, leaving the recruits stunned. Word spread fast. In the mess hall, in the barracks, whispers flew about what had happened on the course. Recruits who once avoided her now nodded in silent acknowledgement. Some even clapped her on the shoulder. She had gone from being the outcast to the one everyone remembered. But Riley didn't bask in it. The truth was, she hadn't proved Halverson wrong, not yet. She had simply refused to break when he wanted her to. That was enough for today, but tomorrow would bring new battles. That night, lying in her bunk with her uniform still damp at the edges, Riley stared at the ceiling and let the exhaustion wash over her. She thought about her mother, her friends, all the doubters. She thought about Halverson's words, a harsh, but maybe, just maybe, carved from a belief that fire only forges steel. Her body ached in every limb, but inside, something steadier had taken root. She didn't just want to survive boot camp anymore. She wanted to see how far that spirit could carry her. When the bugle sounded at dawn the next morning, Riley was the first one out of bed, boots laced tight, eyes sharp, because she knew now, the general could try to crush her spirit, but that was the one weapon she would never surrender. And somewhere, deep down, she suspected Halverson knew it too.